2012, Washington State, Colorado, and possibly California will be voting to decide whether to keep cannabis illegal or become the first states to legalize, tax, and regulate the substance. If they are to succeed, how do you think other states, as well as the federal government, should react?
Well, first of all, it's going to be a nightmare in enforcement if that happens. You would have the states in direct conflict with federal law. Federal law, policymakers, Congress has still made it illegal to possess, to use, traffic in these substances. If you have a state, California, Colorado, that says it's legal under state law, that is totally in conflict. Just because somebody says, well, I've got this marijuana under state law, well, it's still a violation of federal law. So how does the federal government respond to that? They can ignore it, is one option. They can change their own policy to go along with California, a very major state. They could, third, seek an injunction in court to prohibit the use in accordance with the state law because it violates federal law. Or the other option that they could take would be to say, all right, that's your decision, but we're going to withdraw our federal funds for drug rehabilitation, for drug enforcement. Our DEA agents are going to come out of the state. And all the other. So if you think that's a good thing, then that could be a consequence of that. I got a feeling the people of California will not want the federal resources that protect against methamphetamine trafficking, against heroin trafficking, against cocaine trafficking, against other types of trafficking, to those resources to be withdrawn and potentially other resources in it. So there's a number of different reactions. Obviously, it's going to depend upon who's in, what our policymakers in Washington will say as to the direction we go. I think it would be a dangerous step for our country, but that's the great thing about democracy. That the people do get to decide this issue. And let me tell you, if you win in the public arena, hats off to you for that victory. But thus far, I don't know of very many members of Congress, I don't know of very many elected officials who want to move in that direction. But it's a democracy and the people will decide.
And Asa and I can agree that it's going to be a confusing situation. And I should also say that I and my organization, Drug Policy Alliance, we've been deeply involved and played a pivotal role in roughly basically legalizing medical marijuana in roughly 2/3 of the states where it's now legal. And we're deeply involved in California and Washington and Colorado as well, trying to draft and put forward and win responsible legislation. Now, I think first, there are two precedents, there are two models in this area. One of them, more recently, is medical marijuana. And I think it's important for those of you in Arkansas to know there's a good chance you're going to have an opportunity to vote on a medical marijuana ballot initiative in November of 2012. And it's important for you also to know that if it wins, it's not going to set up a situation like Los Angeles or Montana where things got wildly out of control because local legislators failed to regulate it. The laws here are based upon the models in Arizona and Maine, much more strictly regulated, limited number of medical conditions, doctor's recommendation, limited number of dispensaries. So Arkansas could really emerge as a model of responsible regulation of medical marijuana in the United States. So I hope you get on the ballot, I hope it wins. Now that said, there's also a bigger historical model. You know, in the late 1920s, early 1930s, as public opposition to alcohol prohibition rose, many people said, let's end federal prohibition. But as we know, members of Congress are often the last to lead. Leadership has to come from the people, and then it comes from the states, and eventually Congress follows. Well, what happened in the late 20s and early 30s was one state after another began to repeal their alcohol prohibition laws. The feds could still bust people, they didn't have the resources, and they increasingly lacked the motivation. And eventually Congress got the message, and they repealed federal alcohol prohibition. That's the model for reform with medical marijuana and also with marijuana more broadly. The states have to take the leadership, they have to roll it back, they have to push the issue on the feds and Congress. And by the way, a month or two ago, Ron Paul and Barney Frank, the Libertarian Republican and the left-wing Democrat, co-introduced a bill to repeal federal marijuana prohibition. And to my amazement, it already has about a dozen co-sponsors, Democrats, Republicans, including Dana Rohrabacher, conservative from California. So that political play, that messiness that Asa talks about is right, but there's no other alternative. We're going to lead this thing from the ground up.
There are many unintended consequences to a ballot initiative that will purport to legalize, whether it's medical marijuana or the marijuana that's on the ballot now, full legalization of marijuana. Reverend Scott Emler, who is the co-author of Proposition 215, that's a proposition in California, the ballot initiative that legalized medical marijuana. After it turned into where you have cannabis medicinal shops on every corner of the city of Los Angeles and San Diego and elsewhere, this is what he said. We created Prop 215 so patients would not have to deal with black market profiteers. But today it is all about the money. Most of the dispensaries operating in California are little more than dope dealers with storefronts. That was the result of the initiative that was passed in California. He also said it turned it into a joke. I think a lot of people have medicalized their recreational use. Now, I don't mean to diminish that. I think that if there's a medical need and the doctors say you need a particular substance, whether it is Marinol or marijuana or whatever, if the medical community says that, then patients ought to be able to get that. But there is wrapped with abusive potential, and California is the model of abuse and problems with that initiative.
You know, I'll tell you, that story about dispensaries generating all that crime, and I saw you quoted in some CNBC piece a while ago, quoting the California Police Chiefs Association, which is known for producing evidence-free reports. Today, the RAND Corporation, consultant to the Pentagon intelligence agency, came out with a report, and they said, lo and behold, and somewhat to their surprise, when you have a medical marijuana dispensary, you see a reduction in neighboring crime. That's the RAND Corporation's result today, and it's consistent. It's consistent with the findings of police chiefs in Colorado and other places. When you responsibly regulate this stuff, the result is to take this stuff out of the underground, out of the black market, and put it into the responsible channels.
Did they indicate whether usage increased?
Well, actually, it's very interesting as you mentioned that issue, because in fact, for many years and still today, there's almost no evidence that legalization of medical marijuana results in an increase in marijuana use.
What did the RAND study say about increased usage? Because
the RAND study was about the dispensaries issue. Do you want to start an interruption thing going? I'm from New York. We're good at that. I'm holding back. But what I just want to say about this is that when you substitute responsible regulation for a failed prohibitionist policy, that can lead to the best of all results. That's what we're looking for here. I think one of the tragedies with the Clinton and Bush administrations, and now the Obama administration, Obama appeared to open up some room for doing this the right way, and in recent months, what is the Justice Department doing? What they should be doing is encouraging states and localities to responsibly regulate the medical marijuana dispensaries. And instead, what are they doing? They're getting in the way. They're trying to keep this thing messy. They're trying to keep it underground, trying to delegitimize it rather than being advocates for the responsible regulation. That really does need to change.